in the heart of bustling Lagos, where dreams often intertwine with destiny, a young man named Ola stood on the precipice of a life-altering journey. Newly married to the daughter of a powerful businessman, his future seemed secure. But fate, with its unpredictable hand, had other plans. One fateful journey to a remote village, bound by ancient traditions, unravels secrets and tests the limits of love and loyalty. Ola was a young man with a promising future, newly married to Adais, the beautiful daughter of a wealthy and influential businessman, Chief Okonkwo. Adais was the epitome of elegance and sophistication, but very hot-tempered, and their marriage was celebrated with much fanfare in Adais's upscale Lagos neighborhood. Adais's father suggested the couple wait for 1 month before leaving together, as the new house he was building for the couple had not yet been completed. Ola and Adais happily agreed with Chief Okonkwo's idea, knowing that Ola's one-room apartment was not very befitting. Adais also agreed with Ola to wait and get the new house gift from her father first, before they go on their honeymoon. Ola was an orphan who went through thick and thin while growing up before he fought his way to live in the city. Ola knew that marrying Adais meant a secure and prosperous future, but fate had other plans for him. One day, just a few weeks after Ola's wedding, Ola's work required him to travel to a remote village in Gongola State with his colleague and friend Ikem. The town, known as Uzamfa, was shrouded in mystery and old traditions. Ikem, who was familiar with many stories of the place, warned Ola during their canoe ride to the village about the peculiar customs of the villagers, but assured him that there was nothing to worry about. Upon their arrival, the villagers welcomed them with open arms and grand hospitality. The village chief, an elderly man with a wise demeanor, invited them to a feast in their honor. It was during this feast that Ola's life took an unexpected turn. As they ate and mingled with the villagers, Ola noticed a young woman sitting quietly by the fire. There were fresh wounds all over her arms, and the look on her face conveyed a form of sadness. Her name was Amina, and she had an ethereal beauty that captivated Ola instantly aside the wound and her sad expression. She had deep, expressive eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. Ola felt an inexplicable connection to her, a pull he couldn't quite understand. The feast continued, and after a while, Ola excused himself to relieve himself at the back of the house they were seated in front of. A few minutes later, Ola returned but headed to where Amina was sitting. Astounded, Amina lifted her head to look at Ola, who was by then standing before her face. After about 2 seconds, Ola stretched his hand to Amina, possibly to help her up. But there was sudden shout mixed with screaming chorused by the people around before Amina could take Ola's hand. Ola was confused, looking at everyone's faces to get a clue of what was happening. The village chief rose to speak. He explained that it was an ancient tradition of Uzamfa to offer their daughters who found no suitor in the village to strangers as a symbol of trust and to forge bonds with the outside world. The chosen daughter would leave with the first male stranger she touched, or who touched her after her akuri, and they are to start a new life together out of the village. To Ola's shock, the chief announced that Amina had been chosen to leave the village with him. In Uzamfa, if a maiden that is of marriageable age didn't get any man to pay for her bride price to ask for the maiden's hand in marriage after 13 moons from when the village chief priest has publicly announced the names of girls that have become maidens for the year and free to marry. By the way, a moon is a unit of time corresponding to a month. It is widely believed in the village that such a maiden possesses bad character and would be flogged at the village square in front of everyone, then given out in marriage to any stranger that visited the village after the day of her flogging called the Akuri Day. The Akuri event occurred earlier that day before Ola and his friend arrived in the village. Ola was flabbergasted. He beckoned with his 2 hands for them to stop and politely refused the offer, explaining that he was already married and could not take another woman back with him. Besides, he has not touched her. The villagers' warm demeanour quickly changed, and the atmosphere grew tense. The chief's eyes darkened as he spoke in a grave tone, warning Ola that refusal was not an option. The village had honoured their ancient tradition, and defying it could bring misfortune upon both him and the village. The youths in the village began to gather and get more furious about the way Ola spoke angrily at some point with the village chief. Ikem, sensing the danger, urged Ola to accept the offer, at least temporarily, to avoid any immediate threats. Reluctantly, Ola agreed to take Amina with him, planning to sort out the situation once they returned to the city. They were no longer able to fulfill the purpose of their visit to the village. Right from that moment, Ola was thinking of how he would escape from the village before dawn. The chief ordered the village youths to keep Ola, Ikem and Amina together in one hut. Ola's thought of escaping through the window of where they were kept that evening was unfruitful, as he realized he was still being closely monitored by some angry-looking youth groups hanging around the small hut. When morning came, the villagers set them off on their journey. The journey back was silent and tense. Amina, sensing Ola's distress, tried to reassure him that she would not be a burden. She explained that she too had no choice in the matter and only wished for a peaceful resolution. But Ola did not say a word back to her. He hissed and shook his head in confusion. Several thoughts raced through Ola's mind as he suddenly remembered what he had gone through before Adaye's father agreed for him to marry his daughter. In fact, Chief Okonkwo gave his consent because he realized how badly Ola had suffered because of his daughter, especially during the time that Ola was tortured and beaten up every day by Chief Okonkwo's boys, who almost took his life at some point. Following a tip-off by one of Chief Okonkwo's relatives, who told Chief he saw Adaye and Ola together again, after he had warned Ola to leave his daughter alone. Ola stayed back from Adaye for a while, but they rekindled their romance again before it became unbearable for Ola. Throughout those months of torment, Ola was too afraid to see Adaye and stayed indoors. But despite isolating himself, there were times when someone would knock on Ola's door, pretending to deliver something just to get Ola to open the door. He would then be forcibly taken away for his routine daily beating, which eventually left him so severely injured that he spent almost 3 weeks in the hospital. It was when more people in the community where Ola lived started to openly show their anger with how Ola had been treated, coupled with Adizi's unrepentant love for him, that Chief Okonkwo changed his mind and allowed his daughter to marry Ola. Back in Lagos, Ola found himself in a dilemma. He couldn't fathom how to explain Amina's presence to Adize or her formidable father. Chief Okonkwo was known for his fierce protectiveness over his daughter, and Ola knew that any perceived slight could lead to severe repercussions. Ola and Ikem agreed not to let anyone know what happened or about Amina, so they would have time to think of what to do. Ola specifically did not want Adaze to know that he was back in town and did not pick up her calls. Ola and Amina arrived at Ola's modest one-room apartment late in the evening, both exhausted and tense from their irregular departure. The room was small and sparsely furnished, with a single bed pushed against one wall and a tiny kitchenette in the corner. A single window overlooked the bustling street below, offering a glimpse of the city lights. As they entered, they stood silently for a moment, just staring at each other. The weight of their predicament hung heavy in the air. Amina's eyes reflected a mixture of fear and uncertainty, while Ola's face was etched with worry and fatigue. They both knew that their lives had been irrevocably altered in the span of a few hours. What had just happened was almost too much to process. Finally, breaking the silence, Ola cleared his throat. "Sit down. I need to get something from the shop to treat your wound," he said, his voice soft but firm. He pointed to the cut on Amina's arm, a result of her public flogging in the village. "And whatever you do, don't go out. It's not safe." Amina nodded silently, grateful for his concern, but also feeling the unease of being in a strange place under such dire circumstances. Ola quickly left the apartment, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. He found a nearby pharmacy and purchased antiseptic, bandages, and some basic first aid supplies. On his way back, he stopped by a small grocery store and bought some food: bread, canned soup, and bottled water. He knew it wasn't much, but it would have to do for now. When he returned to the apartment, he found Amina sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes distant as she stared at the floor. Ola set the supplies down on the tiny kitchen counter and began to tend to her wound. He worked silently, focused on cleaning and bandaging the cut. Amina watched him with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "Thank you," she said softly as he finished. Ola offered a small smile. "It's the least I can do," he replied. He then moved to the kitchenette and prepared the food he had bought. He handed Amina a plate with some bread and a bowl of heated soup. "Here, eat something. You need to keep your strength up." Amina took the plate and began to eat slowly, her mind still processing the whirlwind of events. Ola sat down on a small chair opposite her, eating his own meal in silence. The sounds of the city outside seemed distant, a stark contrast to the confusion that filled the room. The night stretched on, the silence between them punctuated only by the occasional sound of a car passing by, or a distant shout from the street below. Ola and Amina were both lost in their thoughts, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. As the hours passed, exhaustion began to take its toll. Ola offered Amina the bed, insisting that she take it while he slept on the floor with a makeshift bed of blankets. At first, Amina resisted, but eventually she relented, too tired to argue. "Good night, Amina," Ola said quietly as he settled onto the floor. "Good night, Ola," Amina replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As the room fell into a heavy silence, both of them lay awake, their minds racing with uncertainty and fear of what the future might hold. It was a long night, filled with restless thoughts and the faint hope that somehow they would find a way to navigate the chaos that had upended their lives. By the time Ola woke up in the morning, Amina had already taken her bath and was outside the apartment. Ola heard her speaking with one of his neighbors outside. Ola became furious that Amina went outside and even spoke with his neighbors. Amina apologized and told Ola she was only asking the neighbor where or how they were getting water for the house. He was yet to speak with Adais because she's fond of surprise visits to Ola's place if she becomes aware that Ola is back in town from his travel. However, Ola planned to meet up with Adais later in the day when he would be able to tell her everything that had happened and his plan to assist Amina living in the city if she is too afraid to go back to her village. But keeping Amina with him is out of his plan. But before Ola could have that chance, Adais found out about Ola's secret in a most unexpected and dramatic way. Unbeknownst to Ola, Ikem's flatmate Chidi, who had always harboured feelings for Adais, had been eavesdropping on conversations between Ikem and Ola. When Chidi learned about Amina and the village's strange tradition, he saw an opportunity to drive a wedge between Adais and Ola, hoping she would leave Ola for good. Chidi wasted no time. He positioned himself where Adais would see him when she was passing through, and approached Adais at a cafe where she often visits. With feigned concern, he told her everything he had overheard, painting a vague picture of Amina and the bizarre circumstances that led to her presence in Ola's life. Adais listened, her initial disbelief quickly turning into anger and betrayal. Unable to reach Ola by phone for almost 2 days, Adais decided to confront Ikem. She called him, her voice shaking with fury. Ikem, caught off guard and unable to provide a convincing explanation, stammered through his words, only making Adais more suspicious and agitated. Frustrated by Ikem's evasiveness, Adais marched straight to her father's office. Chief Okonkwo, seeing his daughter's distress, demanded to know what had happened. Adais recounted Chidi's story, that Ola was seeing another woman and was with her while he lied to her about travelling for work purposes. Her voice trembling with anger and hurt. The chief's expression darkened as he listened, his protective instincts kicking in. He assured Adais that he would handle the situation and left to take matters into his own hands. Meanwhile, Ikem, realizing the gravity of the situation, quickly called Ola. "Ola, Adais knows everything. She's told her father and he's furious. You need to get out of there now before you get the time to explain yourself." Ola's heart pounded as he hung up the phone. There was no time to waste. He rushed home, where Amina was quietly reading a book. Grabbing a few clothes and shoving them into a bag, he hurriedly explained the situation to her. "Amina, we need to leave. Now," he said, his voice urgent. Amina, sensing the desperation in his tone, nodded and quickly gathered her a few of her belongings. Together, they slipped out of the apartment and into the bustling streets of Lagos, hoping to evade Chief Okonkwo's wrath. As they made their way through the city, Ola's mind raced with thoughts of Adais and the life he was being forced to leave behind. He felt a pang of guilt for dragging Amina into this mess, but knew there was no turning back now. They needed a plan, and fast. They headed to a small, nondescript hotel on the outskirts of the city. Ola booked a room under a false name, hoping to buy some time to think and figure out their next move. As they settled in, Amina turned to Ola, her eyes filled with concern. "What will we do now, Ola?" she asked softly. Ola sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know yet, Amina, but we'll find a way through this. I promise." Meanwhile, back in the city, Chief Okonkwo was mobilizing his resources to find Ola and Amina. Adais, despite her anger, couldn't help but worry about what might happen to Ola. Chidi, seeing his plan in motion, remained hopeful that Adais would finally turn her back on Ola. Days turned into a week, and Ola and Amina continued to lay low, avoiding places where they might be recognized. Ola managed to get in touch with Ikem, who kept him informed about Chief Okonkwo's search efforts. Ikem, feeling guilty about the whole situation, offered to help them in any way he could. The very next day of getting to the hotel, Ola attempted to call Adais many times, so he could explain to her what had happened, but Adais was not picking up Ola's call. He also sent text messages but got no reply. Ola's friend Ikem sent some money to Ola and advised he got himself a room instead of using his savings to pay for the hotel. Ola quickly got a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Lagos and moved in with Amina. Seated at the wooden table, Ola and Amina finally had a moment to talk. The weight of their situation hung heavily between them. "We can't keep running forever," Ola said. "We need to figure out what to do next." Amara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We will find a way," she replied. "What about your work?" she asked. Ola smiled and said Adai's father owned the place where I work. "But don't worry, I have been searching for another job for a while, even before I got married to Adai's." Desperate and out of options, Ola remembered someone he knew in Lagos's outskirts and decided to reach out to the old friend who lived in a neighboring town. The call Ola made was a lifesaver for Ola, as the old friend linked up Ola with a job in a local newspaper company that needed Ola to resume work immediately. For the first time in days, Ola and Amina felt a sense of peace. "We will get through this," Ola said, holding Amina's hand. She smiled, hope finally returning to her eyes. It was a fresh start, but the shadow of their past still loomed large. Meanwhile, Amina expressed her desire to learn a trade. "I want to learn how to sew," she told Ola one evening. "It will help us stand on our own feet." Ola quickly adapted to his new job, his writing skills and determination making a strong impression on his colleagues. Despite the demanding work, he found solace in the routine, knowing he was building a future for himself. Amina found a local tailor willing to teach her the craft. She dedicated herself to learning, her fingers quickly becoming adept at stitching and creating beautiful garments. Every day, she walked to the small shop, her heart filled with hope and determination. As the weeks turned into months, Ola and Amina found themselves growing closer. They shared their dreams and fears, supported each other through the challenges, and found joy in the small victories of their new life. Ola was happy that Amina adjusted to city life and found work as a seamstress, blending into the urban environment with remarkable ease. But for Amina, these feelings started to blossom into something deeper. One night, as they sat together discussing their day, Amina's heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. She leaned closer to Ola, her eyes reflecting the depth of her feelings. "Ola, I need to tell you something," she whispered. "I think I've fallen in love with you." She moved to kiss him, but Ola gently stopped her, his expression filled with sorrow. Ola took a deep breath, his voice heavy with emotion. "Amina, you mean so much to me, and I care for you deeply, but my heart still belongs to Adai's. I can't move on until I know for sure." The pain in his voice was clear, and Amina's heart ached with the unspoken rejection. Determined to resolve his feelings, Ola called his friend Ikem the next morning. "Ikem, I need your help. I need to speak with Adais. I need to let her know I still love her." Ikem agreed to help, and they planned to meet Adais the following week, hoping to mend the broken pieces of the past. But before the planned date came, one evening, as Ola sat in his apartment, contemplating his next move, there was a knock on the door. It was Adais. She had come to surprise him, but the surprise was on her when she found Amina in Ola's living room again. Adais' face twisted with confusion and anger. "Who is she, Ola? What is going on?" she demanded. Ola, seeing no way out, decided to calm Adais and tell the truth. He explained everything about his trip to Uzamfa, the village's tradition, and the circumstances that led to Amina's presence in his life. Adais listened in stunned silence, her eyes filling with tears. Just as Ola finished his story, the door burst open again, and Chief Okonkwo stormed in, having followed his daughter. His face was a mask of fury as he advanced towards Ola. "You dare betray my daughter," he roared. "I will ruin you, Ola. You will regret ever crossing me." Amina, sensing the gravity of the situation, stepped forward. She addressed Chief Okonkwo with a calm and steady voice, explaining her plight and the village's coercion. She begged for understanding and mercy, not just for herself, but for Ola as well. Chief Okonkwo paused, his eyes narrowing as he studied Amina. Her sincerity and the depth of her plight seemed to reach him. Slowly, his anger began to dissipate. He turned to his daughter, who was watching the exchange with tear-streaked cheeks. "Adais, what do you want to do?" he asked softly. Adais, still reeling from the revelation, took a deep breath. She looked at Ola, then at Amina. Finally she spoke. "Father, I love Ola, but I also see the truth in Amina's words. We cannot blame him for what happened. I don't want to lose him, but we must find a way to resolve this without violence." Chief Okonkwo nodded, his expression softening. He addressed Ola with a stern but understanding look. "You have a good heart, Ola, but you must learn to navigate these complexities better. Amina will stay, but you will bear the responsibility for her well-being. And as for you and Adais, you must rebuild the trust that has been shaken." Ola, overwhelmed with relief, promised to take care of Amina and vowed to regain Adais's trust. The journey ahead would be challenging, but with honesty, compassion, and determination, he hoped to navigate this unexpected twist in his life.